The old piano in the corner of the community center had seen better days. Its wooden surface was scratched, some of the keys had faded, and one pedal squeaked every time it was pressed. Yet every evening, when the room became quiet and the sun slipped behind the buildings outside, the piano came alive. That was because of a young woman named Lily. Most people in town knew her as the music teacher who gave affordable piano lessons to children. Parents appreciated her patience. Students loved how she made difficult songs feel easy. But very few people knew just how talented she really was. Lily never talked much about herself. She preferred letting the music speak for her. Every day followed nearly the same routine. In the mornings, she taught beginners how to find middle C. In the afternoons, she helped older students prepare for school recitals. In the evenings, after everyone had gone home, she stayed behind and practiced alone. Music was not just a hobby for her. It was the one thing that had stayed with her through every difficult season of life. Years earlier, when she was still a teenager, she had dreamed of performing in famous concert halls. Her teachers believed she had extraordinary potential. Some even said she could have a professional career if she continued training. But life did not follow the path she expected. Her family faced financial problems. Opportunities became harder to reach. While other young musicians traveled to competitions and expensive music programs, Lily stayed home and worked part-time jobs to help pay bills. Little by little, her dream seemed to move farther away. Still, she never stopped playing. Even when she felt discouraged, she sat at a piano and poured her emotions into the keys. The music always listened. One rainy afternoon, while helping students clean up after a lesson, Lily noticed a poster hanging on a bulletin board near the entrance. At first, she almost walked past it. But something caught her attention. She stepped closer and read every word. A prestigious music festival was coming to the city. Musicians from across the region were being invited to perform. The event would attract respected conductors, music critics, sponsors, and professional artists. The poster described it as one of the biggest cultural events of the year. Lily felt her heart beat a little faster. She had heard about this festival before. Many successful performers had launched their careers there. She stared at the poster for several seconds. Then she quietly folded one of the application forms and slipped it into her bag. That evening, she placed the form on her kitchen table. The small apartment was silent except for the sound of rain tapping against the window. She made herself a cup of tea and sat down. The application seemed simple enough. Name, experience, performance history, musical background. But as she looked at the questions, doubt slowly crept into her mind. Who was she competing against? Professional musicians, award winners, people with connections, people who performed on famous stages. Compared to them, she felt invisible. Her finger hovered over the application form. For a moment, she considered throwing it away. Then she remembered something her grandmother used to tell her. If a door opens, walk toward it. Don't decide it is closed before you reach it. The memory made her smile. Her grandmother had been her biggest supporter. When Lily was young, she used to sit beside the family piano for hours while Lily practiced. She never complained about hearing the same song repeated 100 times. Instead, she always listened as if it were a private concert. Lily took a deep breath. Then she picked up a pen and began writing. A week later, she mailed the application. After that, she tried not to think about it. Days turned into weeks. Life continued as usual. Lessons, practice, work, sleep. Then one morning an email arrived. She opened it while drinking coffee before her first lesson. Her eyes widened. She had been accepted. For several seconds, she simply stared at the screen. She read the message once, then twice, then a third time just to make sure she had not misunderstood. A laugh escaped her lips. She could hardly believe it. She had actually been invited to perform. Excitement rushed through her, but it was quickly followed by nervousness. Now she had to prove she belonged there. News traveled quickly among her students and friends. Everyone congratulated her. Some were surprised. Others were thrilled. A few admitted they were not surprised at all because they had always believed she was capable of something bigger. Their support encouraged her. Over the following weeks, Lily prepared carefully. Whenever she had free time, she practiced. She reviewed old pieces, experimented with new ideas, refined every detail. The closer the festival came, the more determined she became. Finally, the day arrived for participants to attend an official rehearsal in the city. The concert hall was larger than any venue Lily had ever performed in. Its high ceilings stretched overhead. Rows upon rows of seats filled the room. Bright stage lights illuminated the polished piano standing at center stage. For a moment, Lily simply stood there and admired it. Felt unreal. Musicians moved around the building carrying instruments and sheet music. Some chatted confidently. Others seemed focused and serious. Many appeared experienced and well-known. Lily suddenly felt small among them. She signed in and received her performance schedule. Her smile faded slightly. She had been assigned one of the earliest performance slots. Most of the audience would still be arriving when she played. The evening's headline performers would appear much later. She tried not to let it bother her. A performance was still a performance. As rehearsal began, participants took turns testing the stage. When Lily's turn came, she sat at the piano and gently pressed a few keys. The sound was beautiful, rich, clear, powerful, far better than the old piano she practiced on every day. For a few minutes, she forgot about everything else. She simply enjoyed playing. Afterward, a festival coordinator approached her. The man appeared friendly enough. He smiled politely while looking over a clipboard. "You play very nicely," he said. "Thank you," Lily replied. He nodded. "Just a small suggestion." She waited. "We're expecting a long program. Since you're performing early, it might be best to keep things simple. A modest tune. Nothing too elaborate." Lily blinked. "Oh." The coordinator continued speaking. "Most people will be waiting for the featured performers later in the evening. We want the opening section to stay light and relaxed." His words were polite, but the meaning behind them felt clear. Don't try to stand out. Don't make things complicated. Just fill the time. The coordinator thanked her and moved on. Lily remained standing near the piano. Around her, conversations continued. Musicians practiced. Staff members walked across the stage. Nobody seemed to notice how quiet she had become. She looked down at the keys. A modest tune. The words echoed in her mind. Part of her felt disappointed. Another part felt embarrassed for expecting more. Maybe they were right. Maybe she was just another unknown performer. Maybe nobody would remember her once the famous musicians arrived. For several minutes, she sat alone at the piano after rehearsal ended. The hall gradually emptied. Rows of empty seats stretched before her. She imagined them filled with hundreds of people. Would any of them care about her performance? Would they even pay attention? She wasn't sure. The doubts grew louder. But then her fingers touched the keys. A soft melody filled the empty hall. Simple, gentle, honest. As the notes echoed through the room, something inside her settled. She remembered why she had started playing music in the first place. Not for awards. Not for recognition. Not for applause. She played because music allowed people to feel something words could not express. That truth had never changed. No matter how large the stage became. No matter how famous the other performers were. When the final note faded, Lily slowly stood. The hall was empty now. Only silence remained. She picked up her bag and headed toward the exit. Outside, the evening sky was turning orange as the sun began to set. The city lights flickered on one by one. Tomorrow she would return and perform. Maybe nobody would notice. Maybe everyone would forget. Or maybe something unexpected was waiting on that stage. For the first time all day, a small smile appeared on her face. Whatever happened, she would play her music her way. And that would be enough. The ride back home felt much longer than usual. Lily sat by the bus window, watching the city disappear behind her. Tall buildings slowly gave way to smaller streets, quiet shops, and familiar neighborhoods. People climbed on and off the bus, carrying bags, talking on phones, and rushing to finish their day. But Lily barely noticed any of it. Her mind kept returning to the same sentence. A modest tune. Nothing too elaborate. The festival coordinator had spoken politely. He had not insulted her. He had not laughed at her. Yet his words stayed with her. They reminded her of every time someone had underestimated her. Every time she had been overlooked. Every time people assumed she could not do much because she wasn't famous. By the time she reached home, the evening sky had darkened. She unlocked the door to her small apartment and stepped inside. The room was quiet. The same books sat on the shelves. The same photographs rested on the table. The same old piano waited near the window. Normally, coming home helped her relax. Tonight was different. She placed her bag down and sat at the piano without even turning on the lights. For several moments she simply stared at the keys. Then she began to play. The notes came slowly at first, soft and thoughtful. The music seemed to ask questions she could not answer. Was she really good enough? Did she belong at the festival? Would anyone care about her performance? The melody drifted through the room. As always, the piano listened without judgment. After nearly an hour, Lily stopped playing and leaned back. A framed photograph caught her attention. It showed her sitting beside her grandmother years ago. Both of them were smiling. The picture had been taken shortly after Lily's first small recital. She remembered that day clearly. She had been terrified. Her hands had shaken so badly she thought she would miss every note. But her grandmother had sat in the front row and smiled the entire time. Afterward, while everyone else talked about mistakes and technique, her grandmother had said something different. You made people feel something. At the time, Lily had not fully understood. Years later, she understood perfectly. Music was not just about playing the correct notes. It was about telling a story. It was about making people feel hope, joy, sadness, comfort, or courage. That was what truly mattered. The next morning, Lily woke up earlier than usual. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Several pages were already filled with ideas. For days she had been considering different pieces for the festival. Some were fast and impressive. Others were technically difficult. Many musicians would choose those kinds of performances. They attracted attention. They showed skill. But something felt wrong. The more she thought about it, the more she realized she didn't want to perform a piece simply to impress people. She wanted to perform something meaningful, something honest, something listeners would remember long after the final note. She spent hours going through old sheet music. Some pieces brought back childhood memories. Others reminded her of difficult years she had overcome. As the day passed, an idea slowly began to form. Instead of choosing a famous piece exactly as written, she would create her own arrangement. It would begin simply, very simply, almost like a quiet conversation. Then it would gradually grow into something deeper. The music would tell a story, not with words, with emotion, with memories, with feeling. The more she imagined it, the more excited she became. For the first time since returning from rehearsal, she felt confident again. That evening she stayed at the piano until nearly midnight. She adjusted small details, changed certain sections, added new transitions, removed notes that felt unnecessary. Every choice mattered. Every note had a purpose. Day after day, the arrangement slowly took shape. Meanwhile, life continued around her. Students arrived for lessons. Parents stopped by with questions. Neighbors greeted her in the hallway. Nobody knew how much work she was putting into the upcoming performance. One afternoon, after a lesson ended, one of her longtime friends visited the community center. The friend had known Lily for years and immediately noticed her tired eyes. You've been practicing a lot. Lily laughed. Is it that obvious? A little. The friend sat nearby. So, how's festival preparation going? Lily hesitated. Then she explained everything. The rehearsal, the early performance slot, the coordinator's suggestion, the modest tune. Her friend listened carefully. When Lily finished speaking, there was a moment of silence. Then the friend sighed. Can I be honest? Of course. Don't take this the wrong way. Lily smiled. That doesn't sound promising. The friend laughed. I just think you should be careful. Careful how? People at those events expect certain things. Maybe don't take too many risks. Lily nodded slowly. The advice was well-intentioned, but she had already heard similar advice many times before. Play it safe. Stay comfortable. Don't stand out too much. Don't disappoint anyone. Those suggestions sounded reasonable, yet they often led nowhere. That evening, after everyone left, Lily sat alone in the community center. The room was silent except for the ticking clock on the wall. She looked around at the empty chairs. Many memories lived in this room. Children learning their first notes. Families attending recitals. Students overcoming fears. Small victories that nobody outside the community ever saw. Lily smiled. Those moments mattered. Even if they never appeared in newspapers. Even if nobody famous ever noticed. Suddenly, she remembered another conversation with her grandmother. Years ago, after a disappointing competition, Lily had returned home upset. She had practiced for months. She had worked harder than ever. Yet she had not won. The loss had crushed her confidence. That night, her grandmother sat beside her at the piano. For a long time neither of them spoke. Finally, Lily had asked a question. What if I'm not special? Her grandmother had smiled. Then she answered. The world already has enough people trying to be special. Lily frowned. She didn't understand. Her grandmother continued. What it needs are people willing to be genuine. The memory made Lily smile even now. Genuine. That word stayed with her. Maybe that was exactly what her performance needed. Not perfection. Not flashy tricks. Not impossible difficulty. Just honesty. Over the following week, Lily practiced with renewed purpose. She no longer worried about impressing judges. She no longer worried about competing against famous performers. Instead, she focused on telling a story through music. A story about perseverance. A story about setbacks. A story about finding hope even when nobody believes in you. Every evening she refined the arrangement. The opening remained gentle and simple, just as the coordinator had suggested. But beneath the surface, the music carried deeper emotions. It slowly grew stronger, richer, more powerful, like someone finding their voice after years of being ignored. One afternoon, while practicing, she accidentally lost track of time. The community center had already closed. Outside the windows, darkness had settled over the town. Only a few streetlights glowed in the distance. Lily played the final section of her arrangement. The notes filled the empty room. When she reached the ending, she stopped and sat perfectly still. For several seconds she simply listened to the fading echoes. Then something unusual happened. She felt calm, not confident that she would win, not certain the audience would love it, just calm. For the first time, she realized she didn't need anyone's approval. The performance already meant something to her, and that was enough. The festival was now only 2 days away. Excitement spread across the city. Advertisements appeared online. Famous performers were featured in interviews. Large banners hung outside the concert hall. Lily's name appeared nowhere in the promotions. She noticed. Of course she noticed. But surprisingly, it no longer bothered her. She had spent too many years chasing recognition. Now she cared more about the music itself. The night before the festival arrived. Rain tapped softly against her apartment window, the same way it had on the evening she filled out the application. Lily sat at the piano one final time. She played through the entire arrangement from beginning to end. No interruptions. No stopping. No corrections. Just music. The performance lasted several minutes. When the final note faded, she slowly closed her eyes. The room became quiet. A strange feeling settled over her. Not fear. Not excitement. Something in between. The feeling that comes before an important moment. She stood and walked to the window. Outside, the streets were nearly empty. Tomorrow, hundreds of people would gather inside the grand concert hall. Many would never notice her. Some might barely listen. Others might forget her moments after she finished playing. But perhaps one person would connect with the music. Perhaps one listener would hear something meaningful. And if that happened, the performance would be worthwhile. Lily looked toward the dark sky and smiled softly. Tomorrow she would step onto that stage. Tomorrow she would play the modest tune everyone expected. But she would also play the story hidden inside it. And nobody in that hall would see it coming. The morning of the festival arrived sooner than Lily expected. She woke up before her alarm. For a few seconds, she lay quietly in bed, staring at the ceiling. Then she remembered. Today was the day. The performance she had been preparing for over the last several weeks was finally here. A mixture of excitement and nervousness filled her chest. She sat up slowly and took a deep breath. Outside her apartment window, the city was already awake. Cars moved along the streets. People hurried toward work. The world carried on as if it were an ordinary day. But for Lily, it felt different. After getting ready, she sat at her piano one last time. She didn't practice the full piece. She simply played a few gentle notes. The familiar sound calmed her. It reminded her of home. It reminded her of why she loved music. When she finished, she smiled softly and closed the piano lid. No more rehearsing. No more changes. The music was ready. Now all she had to do was trust it. A few hours later, she arrived at the concert hall. The building looked even more impressive than it had during rehearsal. Large banners decorated the entrance. Guests were already arriving. Photographers moved around capturing pictures of well-known performers. Volunteers welcomed visitors through the front doors. Excitement filled the air. Lily adjusted the strap of her bag and quietly walked inside. Unlike some of the famous musicians, nobody stopped her for interviews. Nobody asked for photographs. She simply signed in and made her way backstage. The performer waiting area buzzed with activity. Some musicians practiced scales. Others reviewed sheet music. Several chatted confidently with friends and supporters. Lily found a quiet corner and sat alone. She opened her notebook and looked through a few final notes. Not because she needed them, simply because it helped settle her nerves. A few minutes later, a staff member entered the room. "We'll begin shortly," the staff member announced. The room became quieter. Everyone knew what that meant. The festival was officially about to start. Lily looked at the schedule once more. Her performance was still listed near the beginning. Just as expected. One by one, audience members filled the hall. From backstage, she could hear conversations and laughter. Hundreds of people were taking their seats. Music lovers, critics, sponsors, professional musicians, students, families, people from all walks of life. The thought made her hands feel slightly colder. She rubbed them together and took a slow breath. The opening ceremony began. Speeches were given. Guests were welcomed. Several important names were mentioned. Applause echoed throughout the building. Lily listened quietly from backstage. Eventually, the performances started. One musician after another took the stage. The audience responded politely. Everything seemed to be moving smoothly. Then a staff member approached her. "You'll be next." For a moment, time seemed to slow down. This was it. Lily stood. She adjusted her sleeves and picked up her music folder, though she had already memorized every note. The staff member smiled. "Good luck." "Thank you." As she waited near the stage entrance, she peeked into the hall. Rows of seats stretched before her. Many were occupied, but she noticed something else. Some audience members were still arriving. Others were checking programs. A few appeared distracted. Several conversations continued quietly. Just as the coordinator had predicted, many people seemed to be waiting for the bigger names later in the evening. The realization could have discouraged her. Instead, it strangely relaxed her. There was nothing left to prove. All she could do was play honestly. The performer before her finished. Applause followed. The announcer stepped forward. After a brief introduction, Lily heard her name. The applause was polite. Nothing more, nothing less. She walked onto the stage. Bright lights immediately filled her vision. For a moment, she could barely see the audience. Then her eyes adjusted. Hundreds of faces looked back at her. Some interested, some distracted, some simply curious. Her heart beat faster, yet she kept walking, step by step, until she reached the piano. The beautiful black instrument stood under the lights like it had been waiting for her. She sat down, adjusted the bench, placed her hands gently above the keys. Then she paused. The hall was not completely silent. People still whispered. Programs rustled. A few late arrivals searched for seats. Part of her wanted to begin immediately. Instead, she waited. 1 breath, 2 breaths, 3. Then her fingers touched the keys. The first notes were soft, almost delicate, simple. Exactly the kind of modest tune the coordinator had requested. The melody moved gently through the hall. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic, just a quiet stream of music. Several audience members continued looking at their programs. A few conversations quietly carried on. Everything seemed normal. Lily remained focused. She did not rush. She did not force anything. She simply told the story she had prepared. The melody continued, gentle and warm, like an old memory returning, like a familiar voice speaking after years apart. Gradually, subtle changes began to appear. The music started to deepen. The melody gained new layers. Small emotional colors slipped between the notes. Most people probably did not notice at first, but they felt it, without realizing it. One audience member looked up from a program. Then another. A woman near the front row slowly lowered her phone. A man who had been speaking quietly stopped mid-sentence. The hall remained calm, yet something was changing. Lily could feel it. The music flowed naturally now. Every section connected to the next. Every phrase carried meaning. She wasn't thinking about judges. She wasn't thinking about critics. She wasn't thinking about winning. She was simply sharing a story about setbacks, a story about persistence, a story about finding strength when nobody expects it. The notes seemed to speak on their own. Backstage, several performers paused what they were doing. One violinist stopped practicing and listened. A singer standing near the curtain turned toward the stage. Even some staff members slowed their work. The melody had quietly captured their attention. Still, Lily remained completely focused on the piano. Her hands moved confidently across the keys. Months of practice, years of experience, a lifetime of emotion, all of it poured into the music. The piece continued to grow. The simple opening slowly transformed into something richer, something deeper, something impossible to ignore. Now the hall was noticeably quieter. Programs were no longer rustling. Conversations had faded away. People who had planned to listen casually now sat still. Many leaned forward in their seats. Without realizing it, they had become part of the story. Lily felt the energy in the room shifting. The audience was listening, really listening. A warm feeling spread through her chest. Not pride, not excitement, connection, the kind every musician hopes to find. For years she had played in small rooms, tiny recitals, community events, classrooms. Now she felt the same connection in a grand concert hall. The size of the audience no longer mattered. The music was reaching them. As the piece moved into its middle section, the emotions deepened further. Moments of struggle appeared in the melody. Gentle tension emerged. Certain notes carried sadness. Others carried determination. The story continued unfolding. Many audience members sat completely still now. A few seemed emotional. Some closed their eyes. Others watched every movement of her hands. Even people who knew nothing about music could feel something happening. They didn't need technical knowledge. They didn't need training. Human emotion spoke a language everyone understood. Backstage, the coordinator who had suggested the modest tune happened to stop near the curtain. At first, he listened casually. Then he remained. His expression slowly changed. The performance unfolding before him was not what he had expected. Not at all. Meanwhile, Lily entered the next section. The music began rising. Not suddenly. Gradually. Like sunlight appearing after a long storm. The melody expanded. The emotional weight grew stronger. Every note seemed to carry purpose. Every phrase felt alive. The audience remained silent, not because they were bored, because they were completely absorbed. The atmosphere inside the hall had transformed. People who had barely noticed her introduction were now hanging on every note. Even the air seemed still. The grand piano responded beautifully beneath her hands. Rich tones filled every corner of the room. The sound wrapped around the audience, drawing them deeper into the story. Lily no longer saw individual faces. She no longer noticed the bright lights. Everything else disappeared. There was only the music, only the story, only the moment. The final section approached. The most important part. The part she had worked on countless times. The section where every emotion would come together. As she prepared to play it, a feeling washed over her. Not fear, not nervousness, gratitude, because no matter what happened next, she had already achieved something meaningful. The audience was listening, truly listening. The modest tune had become something far more powerful than anyone expected. Lily took a gentle breath. Her fingers moved toward the next phrase. And across the hall, hundreds of people sat in complete silence, waiting for what would come next. The silence inside the concert hall felt different now. It was no longer the distracted silence that had existed when Lily first walked onto the stage. This silence was focused, intentional. Hundreds of people sat completely still, waiting for the next note. Lily could feel it. The audience had become part of the performance. Every emotion she poured into the music seemed to return to her through the room itself. She took a gentle breath. Then her fingers touched the keys again. The final section had begun. The melody rose slowly, carrying everything that had come before it. The struggles, the doubts, the quiet moments, the hope, all of it seemed woven together. The music was no longer simply being heard. It was being felt. A woman near the front row pressed a hand against her chest. An elderly man sitting beside her leaned forward without realizing it. Several audience members who had arrived late and barely paid attention earlier now stared toward the stage without blinking. The notes flowed through the hall like a conversation everyone somehow understood. Lily remained completely focused. Her hands moved naturally. Every note felt connected to a memory. She remembered long evenings practicing alone. She remembered community recitals where only a handful of people attended. She remembered wondering whether her dream would ever become something more. Most of all, she remembered her grandmother, the person who had always believed in her, the person who had listened when nobody else seemed interested. As those memories filled her mind, her playing became even more heartfelt. There was no pretending, no performance for show, only honesty, and the audience could feel it. Backstage, more performers had gathered near the curtain. Some stood quietly, others sat nearby listening. Nobody spoke. Nobody wanted to interrupt the moment. Even the festival staff seemed unusually still. The coordinator who had advised Lily to keep things simple remained near the side of the stage. His clipboard hung forgotten at his side. The expression on his face had changed completely. This was not the performance he expected. The unknown pianist he had nearly overlooked was now holding the attention of an entire concert hall. Meanwhile, the music continued building. Not through speed, not through loudness, but through emotion. The melody grew stronger, more confident, like someone finally finding the courage to step forward after years of standing in the shadows. Lily could sense the audience following every note. There was something beautiful about that feeling. Music often connected strangers. People with different lives, different backgrounds, different experiences. Yet for a few minutes, everyone inside the hall shared the same journey, the same emotions, the same story. As the piece moved toward its ending, the energy in the room became almost impossible to describe. Nobody checked their phones. Nobody whispered. Nobody shifted in their seats. The hall felt frozen in time. One final section remained. The most emotional part of the entire arrangement. The section Lily had rewritten countless times. The part she had practiced over and over until it felt exactly right. Her fingers moved gently across the keys. The melody softened. The volume dropped. The music seemed to pull everyone closer, like a secret being shared, like a memory spoken quietly. Several people in the audience felt tears forming, not because the music was sad, because it felt real. It reminded them of their own struggles, their own dreams, their own moments of doubt and hope. The power of music was never about notes alone. It was about what people carried inside themselves when they heard it. Lily understood that now more than ever. The final phrases approached. Each note felt precious. Each moment felt meaningful. She knew the performance would soon end. Part of her wished she could stay inside the music forever. Another part felt grateful simply to be there. A young music student seated several rows back watched with wide eyes. The student had come to see famous performers later in the evening. Yet somehow it was this unknown pianist who had made the deepest impression. Nearby, a professional music critic slowly lowered a pen. For most performances, notes filled the pages of the critic's notebook. This time, writing had stopped several minutes earlier. The critic simply listened. On the other side of the hall, a respected conductor sat quietly. The conductor had attended countless concerts over the years. World-class musicians, award-winning performers, international artists. Yet there was something rare about what was happening on stage. Technical skill could be taught. Emotional honesty could not. And Lily possessed it in abundance. The final passage arrived. The melody climbed gently upward one last time. Not dramatically, not forcefully, beautifully, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. The music carried warmth, hope, strength, everything Lily wanted to express, everything she had lived through, everything she had learned. The grand piano responded perfectly beneath her hands. Its rich sound filled every corner of the hall. The audience remained completely silent. Many hardly seemed to breathe. The last notes approached. Lily felt her heart beating steadily. Surprisingly, she wasn't nervous anymore. She wasn't thinking about judges. She wasn't thinking about results. She wasn't even thinking about applause. She simply wanted to finish the story the right way, the way it deserved. One final phrase flowed through the hall. Gentle, clear, honest. Then came the final note. It lingered in the air, beautiful and pure. For a moment, time seemed to stop. The sound slowly faded, then disappeared, and silence remained. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The hall sat frozen. 1 second passed. Then another. Then another. Lily remained seated at the piano. Her hands rested quietly in her lap. She looked out toward the audience. Hundreds of faces stared back. The silence continued. For a brief moment, uncertainty touched her heart. Had they liked it? Had she done enough? Then suddenly someone stood. The sound of a single pair of hands clapping echoed through the hall. Another person stood. Then another. And another. Within seconds, the entire audience rose to their feet. Applause exploded throughout the building. The sound was overwhelming. People cheered. Many smiled. Some wiped away tears. The standing ovation spread across the entire hall like a wave. Lily blinked in surprise. For a moment, she genuinely did not know how to react. She had imagined many possibilities. This was not one of them. The applause continued growing louder. People refused to sit down. Several audience members continued clapping above their heads. Others shouted words of praise. The response seemed endless. Backstage, performers joined the applause. Staff members applauded. Volunteers applauded. Even the coordinator who had advised her to keep things simple found himself clapping with everyone else. His expression carried both admiration and disbelief. Lily slowly stood from the piano bench. Emotion filled her chest. She bowed politely. The applause only became louder. Another wave of cheering swept through the hall. For the first time all evening, she felt truly overwhelmed. Not because of attention, not because of recognition, because the audience had understood. They had connected with the music exactly as she had hoped. That realization meant more than any award. After several moments, she bowed once more. The audience continued applauding. Eventually, She turned and began walking toward the side of the stage. Yet even then, the applause refused to fade. People remained standing. Many watched her leave as if they didn't want the moment to end. Backstage, performers greeted her with smiles. Some offered congratulations. Others shook her hand. Several seemed genuinely amazed. Lily thanked them politely, still struggling to process everything that had happened. As she moved farther behind the curtain, the applause finally began to soften. But its impact remained. The coordinator approached her. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then he smiled. A different smile than before. More sincere. "I think," he said quietly, "that was much more than a modest tune." Lily couldn't help laughing. "So it seems." The coordinator shook his head. "I honestly didn't expect that." "Neither did I." He smiled again. Then another staff member hurried over. "There are people asking about her already." "What do you mean?" the coordinator asked. "Journalists, critics, guests." The staff member looked toward Lily. "They all want to know who she is." Lily stared in surprise. "What?" The staff member nodded. "I'm serious. People keep asking." The realization felt almost unreal. Only a few hours earlier, she had been the performer nobody paid much attention to. Now people wanted to learn her story. The news spread quickly through the building. Audience members talked excitedly during intermission. Conversations centered around the unknown pianist whose performance had stunned the room. Some described the emotions they felt. Others discussed specific moments from the piece. Everyone seemed to have their own reaction. Yet one thing remained consistent. Nobody was forgetting her performance. As Lily stood backstage listening to the distant conversations, she thought about the journey that had brought her there. The years of practice, the disappointments, the sacrifices, the moments when giving up would have been easier. Every step suddenly felt worthwhile. Not because she had received applause, because she had stayed true to herself. And somehow that had reached people in a way she never expected. But what Lily didn't realize was that this standing ovation was only the beginning. By the time the night ended, her performance would be talked about far beyond the walls of the concert hall. And her life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. When the festival finally ended that night, Lily expected life to return to normal. She imagined going home, getting some rest, and waking up the next morning ready to teach her students. After all, that was what she had always done. No matter how special an event felt, life usually moved on. But this time was different. Even before she left the concert hall, people were still talking about her performance. Audience members stopped her in the hallway. Some thanked her. Others shared personal stories about how the music had reminded them of important moments in their lives. A middle-aged woman approached her with tears in her eyes. "I don't know how to explain it," she said softly. "Your music reminded me of my mother." Lily smiled warmly. "Thank you." The woman nodded. "I haven't thought about some of those memories in years." After she walked away, another person stepped forward. Then another. And another. Each person had a different story. Yet many said something similar. The music had made them feel something real. That meant more to Lily than any compliment about skill or technique. By the time she finally returned home that evening, she was exhausted. The apartment felt strangely quiet after everything that had happened. She set her bag down and sat on the couch. For several minutes she simply stared at the wall. The entire day felt unreal. The standing ovation, the applause, the conversations, the unexpected attention. Part of her still wondered if she had imagined it all. Eventually she laughed softly to herself. Then she made a cup of tea and headed to bed. Tomorrow would be normal again, or so she thought. The next morning, her phone began ringing before breakfast. At first she ignored it. Then it rang again, and again. Finally she answered. One of her friends was calling. "You need to look online." Lily frowned. "Why?" "Just trust me." After ending the call, she opened her computer. Within seconds, her eyes widened. Videos from the festival had already appeared online. Audience members had recorded parts of her performance and shared them. Thousands of people had watched. Comments continued pouring in. Many praised the emotion in her music. Others talked about the standing ovation. Some wondered who she was. Several people described her as the surprise of the festival. Lily sat quietly staring at the screen. She had never experienced anything like this before. More messages arrived throughout the morning. Former students reached out. Old friends sent congratulations. People she hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered her. The attention felt overwhelming. Yet she tried not to get carried away. By afternoon, another surprise arrived. An email appeared in her inbox. Then another. Then several more. Some came from local event organizers. Others came from concert venues. A few invited her to perform at upcoming events. One message came from a music organization interested in featuring her at a regional showcase. Lily reread the emails several times. Only days earlier, she had worried that nobody would remember her performance. Now invitations were arriving faster than she could process them. She felt grateful, but also cautious. Success could disappear as quickly as it arrived. She didn't want to lose herself chasing attention. That evening she went to the community center for her regular lessons. As soon as she entered, something felt different. The students were waiting. The moment they saw her, excitement exploded. "Congratulations! We saw the video. You were amazing." Several children rushed over at once. Lily laughed. One at a time. The room filled with energy. Even some parents stopped to congratulate her. One parent smiled and shook her head. "I always knew you were talented." Lily smiled politely. The truth was that many people had never fully noticed her talent before. Not because they were unkind, because they had simply never seen her on a larger stage. Now they had. Yet despite all the attention, Lily continued teaching exactly as she always had. She showed beginners where to place their fingers. She encouraged nervous students. She celebrated small improvements. Nothing about that changed. In fact, it became even more important to her. The festival reminded her how much impact a teacher could have. Someone had once believed in her. Now she wanted to do the same for others. Meanwhile, news about her performance continued spreading. Local newspapers wrote articles about the unexpected festival highlight. Several music blogs discussed the standing ovation. One headline described her as the pianist nobody expected and nobody could forget. Another article focused on her journey from community music teacher to festival sensation. The attention brought even more invitations. One afternoon, Lily received a phone call from a respected concert organizer. The organizer spoke warmly. "We would love to feature you in our upcoming series." Lily nearly dropped the phone. The concert series was well known. Performers often waited years for such opportunities. After ending the call, she sat quietly for several minutes. Everything was happening so quickly. A few weeks earlier, she had been worried about whether anyone would listen. Now people actively wanted to hear her play. The contrast felt almost impossible to believe. Yet perhaps the biggest surprise came several days later. The festival coordinator contacted her. The same coordinator who had suggested keeping things simple. He invited her back to the concert hall for a small meeting. Curious, Lily agreed. When she arrived, he greeted her warmly. His attitude was noticeably different. Not disrespectful before, just different. This time there was genuine admiration in his voice. "I wanted to congratulate you personally." "Thank you." He smiled. "I've been organizing events for many years." Lily listened. "And every once in a while, a performance comes along that surprises everyone." He paused. "Yours was one of those performances." Lily felt slightly embarrassed by the praise. The coordinator continued. "I owe you an apology." She looked surprised. "For what?" He laughed softly. "For assuming I knew what kind of performance you would give." Lily smiled. "That's all right." "No," he said. "You earned much better than that." For a moment neither of them spoke. Then he added something unexpected. "Many performers try very hard to impress people." Lily nodded. "But your performance felt different." "How?" "It felt honest." The word immediately reminded her of her grandmother. Honest. genuine, real, the qualities she had tried to bring into every note. The conversation stayed with her long after she left the hall. As the days passed, more opportunities appeared. Yet something inside Lily remained unchanged. She still practiced every evening. She still worked hard. She still believed the music mattered more than recognition. One weekend she decided to visit her hometown, the place where her journey had begun, the place where she first learned to love music. Walking through the familiar streets brought back countless memories. Nothing had changed very much. The bakery still stood on the corner. The park looked the same. The old community building remained exactly where she remembered. People recognized her quickly. News of the festival had already reached town. Neighbors stopped to say hello. Former teachers congratulated her. Several residents proudly told others they had known her for years. Lily appreciated every kind word. But what touched her most was visiting the small hall where she had given some of her earliest performances. The room seemed much smaller than she remembered. A few rows of chairs, a modest stage, simple decorations. Yet standing there brought back powerful emotions. She remembered being nervous. She remembered making mistakes. She remembered learning, growing, improving. Every step had mattered. Without those small beginnings, the festival performance would never have happened. As she stood quietly inside the empty hall, she realized something important. Success rarely arrives all at once. Most people only see the final moment, the standing ovation, the recognition, the applause. They rarely see the years of effort behind it, the setbacks, the doubts, the quiet work nobody notices. Lily understood that better than anyone. Later that evening, she returned home feeling grateful. Not because her life had changed, because she had finally seen how every part of her journey connected together. The struggles had taught her resilience. The disappointments had taught her patience. The years of being overlooked had taught her humility. And now those lessons were opening doors she never expected. But an even bigger opportunity was about to arrive. One that would place her in front of the largest audience she had ever faced. An opportunity that could change the course of her career forever. And when the invitation finally arrived, Lily could hardly believe what she was reading. The invitation arrived on a quiet Tuesday morning. Lily was finishing a lesson with one of her younger students when her phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen and saw an unfamiliar email notification. Normally, she would have ignored it until later. But something about the subject line caught her attention. After the lesson ended, she sat down and opened the message. Her eyes widened. Then she read it again and again. The invitation was real. A national arts organization was hosting one of the country's largest cultural events later that year. Thousands of people would attend in person. Many more would watch online. The event featured respected musicians, artists, and performers from across the nation. And they wanted Lily to perform. For several moments she simply stared at the screen. The opportunity felt almost impossible to believe. Only a few months earlier, she had been teaching lessons in relative anonymity. Now she was being invited to perform on one of the biggest stages of her life. A smile slowly appeared on her face. Then came the nervousness. The event was much larger than the festival. The audience would be bigger. The expectations would be higher. The attention would be greater. Yet beneath all of those feelings was something stronger. Gratitude, because she knew exactly how close she had come to giving up on her dream years ago. If she had stopped believing in herself then, none of this would have happened. That evening, she sat at her piano and thought about the journey that had brought her here. The room was quiet except for the sound of distant traffic outside. Her fingers rested gently on the keys. She remembered the difficult years, the moments when opportunities seemed out of reach, the times when she questioned whether anyone would ever hear her music. Most of all, she thought about her grandmother. The person who had believed in her before anyone else did. The person who had encouraged her through every setback. A warm smile crossed her face. Without realizing it, she began playing. The melody flowed naturally. Simple, gentle, honest. Just the way her grandmother always loved it. As the music filled the room, an idea came to her. For the upcoming performance, she would dedicate the piece to her grandmother. Not publicly for attention, not for recognition, simply as a way of honoring the person who helped shape her journey. The thought felt right. Over the following weeks, preparation began. Once again, her days filled with practice. But this time something was different. The pressure that once frightened her no longer had the same power. She had learned an important lesson at the festival. Success did not come from trying to impress people. It came from being genuine. That lesson guided every rehearsal, every note, every decision. Meanwhile, excitement continued growing around the upcoming event. Promotional materials featured participating artists. News outlets discussed the performances. Tickets sold quickly. People looked forward to the celebration. As the event approached, interview requests increased. Journalists wanted to know more about the pianist who had unexpectedly captured a festival audience. Many asked the same question. What changed your career? Lily always gave a similar answer. Nothing changed overnight. Some reporters seemed surprised. They expected a dramatic answer, a secret formula, a lucky break. Instead, Lily spoke honestly. She talked about years of practice, years of learning, years of growth, because that was the truth. One performance had opened doors, but it had not created her talent. The work had happened long before anyone noticed. Those words resonated with many people, especially young musicians. Messages began arriving from students around the country. Some felt discouraged. Others struggled with confidence. Many wondered whether their hard work would ever matter. Lily tried to respond whenever possible. She encouraged them to keep going, to stay patient, to focus on improvement rather than recognition, because she understood those feelings better than anyone. Finally, the day of the national event arrived. The venue was enormous, far larger than the festival hall. As Lily entered the building, she paused for a moment. People moved in every direction. Performers prepared backstage. Technicians checked equipment. Organizers coordinated schedules. The entire place buzzed with energy. Yet despite the excitement around her, Lily felt surprisingly calm. Not because she wasn't nervous, because she knew why she was there. She wasn't there to prove anyone wrong. She wasn't there to show off. She was there to share music. The same reason she had always played. Hours later, her performance time approached. Backstage, she sat quietly beside the piano waiting area. Other performers reviewed notes and rehearsed final details. Lily simply closed her eyes for a moment. In her mind, she saw her grandmother sitting beside the family piano years ago, listening patiently, smiling proudly, believing completely. The memory brought comfort. Soon a staff member approached. "It's time." Lily stood, took a deep breath, and followed the staff member toward the stage. The audience stretched across the massive venue. Thousands of people filled the seats. Bright lights illuminated the stage. Cameras prepared to broadcast the performance. For a brief moment, the size of the event felt overwhelming. Then she remembered something important. Whether there were 10 listeners or 10,000 listeners, music worked the same way. One heart at a time. That thought settled her nerves. She walked toward the piano. Applause greeted her arrival. Warm, respectful, sincere. She smiled and took her seat. The hall gradually became quiet. Lily placed her hands above the keys. Then she began. The opening notes floated gently into the air. Simple, elegant, honest. The same qualities that had connected with audiences before. The music unfolded naturally. Every section carried emotion. Every phrase carried meaning. The audience listened carefully. The massive venue felt strangely intimate, as if the music had transformed the space into a conversation between friends. Minutes passed. The story within the melody continued growing. Hope, determination, gratitude, resilience. The emotions flowed through every note. Many audience members sat completely still. Others closed their eyes. Some smiled softly. The connection was unmistakable. And as Lily played, she felt something she had not expected. Peace. the kind that comes when a person finally understands their purpose. For years she thought success meant reaching larger stages, receiving recognition, building a career. Now she understood something deeper. Success meant using her gift in a meaningful way. Everything else was secondary. The performance moved toward its ending. The emotional weight grew stronger. The final melody carried every lesson she had learned, every challenge she had overcome, every person who had helped her along the way, especially one grandmother who never stopped believing. The final notes rang through the hall. Beautiful, warm, complete. Then silence followed. A familiar silence. The same kind she remembered from the festival. The kind that appears when people need a moment to absorb what they have just experienced. For a second, nobody moved. Then applause erupted. Thousands of people rose to their feet. The standing ovation spread throughout the venue. Wave after wave of applause filled the room. Lily stood and bowed. Emotion filled her eyes. Not because of the applause itself, because of what it represented. Connection, understanding, shared humanity, the very things she had always hoped music could create. The applause continued for several minutes. Eventually, she left the stage. But the impact of the performance remained. In the weeks that followed, new opportunities appeared. Major venues reached out. Organizations offered partnerships. Concert invitations arrived from different regions. Her professional career officially reached a new level. Yet despite all the changes, some things never changed. Lily continued teaching. She continued mentoring young musicians. She continued practicing every day. And she continued approaching music with the same humility she always had. Several months later, another invitation arrived. This one made her smile immediately. It came from the very festival where everything had begun. The organizers wanted her to return, not as an early performer, not as an unknown participant, as the headline performer, the featured artist. When she arrived at the festival that year, everything felt different. Banners displayed her name. Audiences looked forward to hearing her. People recognized her immediately, yet she remained the same person she had always been. Before the evening performance, she crossed paths with the coordinator who had once advised her to play a modest tune. He smiled warmly. "I've been hoping to see you again." "So have I." For a moment they both laughed. Then his expression grew sincere. "I never properly apologized." "You don't need to." "I do." He shook his head gently. "I underestimated you." Lily smiled. "We all make mistakes." The coordinator nodded. "Thank you for being gracious about it." She appreciated his honesty. There was no bitterness between them, no resentment, only mutual respect. That evening, Lily stepped onto the stage once more. This time the hall was completely full. People waited eagerly for the performance to begin. As she sat at the piano, she looked across the audience. Some faces were familiar, others were new. Among them were young musicians carrying dreams of their own, people who doubted themselves, people wondering whether anyone would ever notice their efforts, people standing exactly where she once stood. Lily smiled softly. Then she began to play, and as the music filled the hall, her journey came full circle. The woman once told to play a modest tune had become an inspiration to countless others. Not because she chased fame, not because she demanded attention, but because she stayed true to herself when nobody was watching. And in the end, that made all the difference.